The twins of the widowed millionaire wouldn't eat a thing, until the cleaner's daughter discovered why. Richard Mitchell paced back and forth in his children's room, watching with growing despair the two cribs where William and James, his 6-month-old twins, lay listless. For 3 days the babies had refused all food, whether the special imported formula or the organic purees prepared by the cook. The twins' refusal to eat had started suddenly, right after a routine checkup with their pediatrician. Richard had lost his wife Jennifer during childbirth 6 months earlier, and since then he had done everything to ensure his sons received the best possible care. He had hired top professionals, bought the most modern equipment, but nothing seemed to work now that William and James simply refused to open their mouths. "Mr. Richard, Dr. Thompson is on the phone again," announced Mrs. Wilson, the housekeeper who had cared for the home for over 15 years. She had been Jennifer's own nanny as a child and now tried to help however she could with the grandchildren. Richard answered the call with trembling hands. The pediatrician, considered one of the best in New York City, sounded worried on the other end. "Richard, I need to be frank with you. We've ruled out all obvious medical possibilities. The boys' tests are normal, no signs of infection, allergies, or digestive issues. But if they continue without proper nourishment, we'll need to consider hospitalization for IV fluids." "It can't be anything serious, doctor. They've always been healthy babies," Richard insisted, though his voice betrayed his anguish. "I know, Richard. That's exactly why I'm puzzled. Sometimes babies develop temporary aversions, but 3 days is concerning. I'll stop by this evening for another exam." After hanging up, Richard sank heavily into the armchair beside the cribs. The twins were awake, but their expressions seemed distant, as if searching for something they couldn't find. Mrs. Wilson entered the room quietly, carrying a tray with prepared bottles. "Let's try one more time, my dear," she said, lifting William with the ease of decades of childcare experience. The baby turned his face away the moment the bottle neared, whimpering softly. James, in the neighboring crib, began crying too, as if sensing his brother's discomfort. "They do this every time," Richard murmured, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "It's like they're waiting for something, and I can't figure out what." Meanwhile, downstairs, Sarah Johnson was finishing up in the kitchen. She had worked at the Mitchell mansion for 2 years, always discreet and efficient. That day, as she did twice a week, she had brought along her 8-year-old daughter, Emma, since the girls' school only ran for half the day. Sarah had noticed the unusual tension in the house these past few days. Her employer seemed more stressed than usual, and Mrs. Wilson was visibly worried, whispering prayers in Italian whenever she thought no one was looking. "Mum, why is Mr. Richard so sad?" Emma asked quietly as she played with a cloth doll in the living room. "The babies aren't feeling well, sweetheart. But it's not our place to ask, understand?" Sarah replied softly, always careful to maintain the professional distance her job required. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, continuing. Emma was an observant and sensitive child. From a young age, she had shown an almost intuitive ability to sense the moods of those around her. When she was little, she could calm other babies in the hospital where she was born just by being present, something the nurses would remark on with admiration. "Can I help in any way?" the girl asked, her brown eyes shining with sincerity. "Sweetheart, you're too young to worry about such things. Let's focus on doing our job properly," Sarah replied, though she knew her daughter had a heart bigger than her own chest. At that moment, the twins' crying grew louder upstairs. It was a sound that pierced through the mansion's walls, carrying an anguish that made anyone's heart clench. Richard hurried down the stairs, looking for Mrs. Wilson. "Wilson, I need you to call that specialist in childhood eating disorders Dr. Thompson mentioned. I can't wait any longer." "I already tried, sir. He only has availability next week," Mrs. Wilson answered, wringing her hands nervously. "Next week? My children might not make it till then," Richard snapped, the pressure of the last few days finally boiling over. Sarah, who was waxing the nearby hallway, couldn't help but overhear the conversation. Her motherly heart ached for the situation. She remembered when Emma went through a difficult phase at 3 years old, refusing to eat after their father abandoned them. Back then, she discovered the girl would only accept food when she heard a specific lullaby her maternal grandmother used to sing. "Mom, can I go upstairs to see the babies?" Emma whispered, tugging at Sarah's blouse. "Absolutely not, Emma. You know we can't bother the boss right now," Sarah scolded, though her voice lacked real severity, but the girl had already begun quietly climbing the stairs, driven by an inexplicable need to be near the crying babies. Sarah quickly followed, fearing her daughter might cause trouble. When they reached the second-floor hallway, the twins' crying was louder than ever. Emma stopped in front of the slightly ajar nursery door, watching Richard and Mrs. Wilson desperately try to soothe William and James. "They're missing something," Emma murmured, barely realizing she'd spoken aloud. Richard turned abruptly, noticing the girl for the first time. "What did you say?" he asked, stepping closer. Sarah hurried to pull her daughter back. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell. She didn't mean to intrude. We'll leave right now." "No, wait," Richard raised his hand. "What did you mean by, 'they're missing something,' child?" Emma looked at her mother, silently asking permission to respond. Sarah hesitantly nodded. "My grandma always said babies get sad when they miss something important. It could be a song, a smell, or the voice of someone special," the girl explained with the simple wisdom of childhood. Richard felt something stir in his chest. Jennifer used to sing to her belly during the pregnancy. She had a sweet, melodious voice and would spend hours talking and singing to the babies before they were born. "Mrs. Wilson, do you remember the songs Jennifer used to sing when she was pregnant?" he asked, a new hope rising in his eyes. The housekeeper paused to think, tears beginning to form. "She sang that Italian lullaby her mother taught her. How did it go?" Mrs. Wilson began humming a soft, nostalgic melody. Immediately the twins' cries lessened. William turned his little head toward the voice, and James stopped thrashing in his crib. "My God," Richard whispered. "Keep singing, Wilson." But when Mrs. Wilson tried to recall the full lyrics, her voice faltered. It had been years since she'd heard the song, and she could only remember fragments of the melody. That's when Emma, who had been watching everything carefully, began to hum softly. The melody coming from her mouth was incredibly similar to what Mrs. Wilson had started, but complete and in tune. The twins calmed down completely. William opened his eyes wide, and James showed something that looked like a smile. "How do you know this song?" Richard asked, amazed. "My great-grandmother taught me. She came from Italy when she was young and always sang to me when I was little," Emma replied shyly. Sarah was stunned. She had never seen her daughter sing that specific melody before, though she knew Emma's grandmother had passed down many traditional Italian songs to the family. "Could you sing it again?" Richard asked, his voice filled with emotion. Emma nodded and began to sing once more. This time, William and James not only calmed down, but also started making little sounds, as if trying to follow the melody. Mrs. Wilson rushed to get the bottles. When she returned, Emma was still singing, and the babies seemed hypnotized by her voice. "Let's try feeding them now," Mrs. Wilson suggested. Richard picked up William and offered the bottle while Emma continued singing. To everyone's astonishment, the baby opened his mouth and began sucking normally, as if nothing had happened over the past 3 days. James accepted the food just as easily when it was his turn. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," Richard murmured, tears of relief streaming down his face. Sarah was torn between the joy of seeing the babies eating and concern about the implications of the situation. Her daughter had somehow solved a problem that specialized doctors couldn't understand. "Mr. Mitchell, maybe we should call Dr. Thompson to confirm everything's all right," she suggested, ever practical. "Yes, you're right," Richard agreed, but he couldn't take his eyes off his sons, who were sucking the bottles with voracious appetite. "But first, I need to understand better what happened here." He turned to Emma, who had stopped singing and was watching the babies with satisfaction. "Is your great-grandmother still alive, dear?" "No, sir. She passed away when I was 5, but before she left, she taught me all the songs her family used to sing in Italy," Emma explained. "And you remember all of them?" "Most of them, yes. Grandma always said the songs carry the soul of the family and that we should never let them die." Richard felt a shiver. Jennifer had always talked about preserving family traditions and had mentioned many times that she wanted to teach Italian songs to their children when they grew up. "Mrs. Johnson, I'd like to make you an offer," Richard said, an idea forming in his mind. "Sir?" Sarah replied, apprehensive. "It's obvious your daughter has some kind of connection with the twins' voices. I don't know how or why, but I can't ignore the facts. I'd like her to come here every day to help with the boys' feedings." Sarah was silent for a moment, processing the proposal. "Mr. Mitchell, I appreciate the trust, but Emma is just a child. She has school, homework. I'd pay extra for her time, of course, and she could do her schoolwork here while the babies nap. I have a well-equipped library and can hire a tutor if needed." Emma looked at her mother with hopeful eyes. The idea of helping the babies deeply appealed to her. "Mom, can I? I promise I won't neglect my schoolwork," she pleaded. "That's not what worries me, sweetheart," Sarah replied, biting her lower lip. "I just don't want you to get too attached and then get hurt if things change." Richard understood Sarah's concern. Wealthy employers sometimes made impulsive decisions that affected the lives of those less fortunate. "Mrs. Johnson, I understand your reservations. How about we try a one-week trial? If everything works out well for everyone involved, we can formalize a more long-term agreement." At that moment, Dr. Thompson arrived for the promised examination. Mrs. Wilson greeted her in the entry hall and quickly explained what had happened. "Are the babies eating?" the doctor asked, incredulous. "Yes, doctor, and it's all thanks to this young girl here." Richard pointed to Emma, who waved shyly. Dr. Thompson went upstairs to examine William and James. After a full evaluation, she confirmed that both were hydrated and their vital signs were normal. "This is extraordinary," she remarked, "but I'd like to better understand this situation before giving my medical approval." She sat down to talk with Richard, Sarah, and Emma, listening carefully to the whole story. From a scientific standpoint, it's possible the babies developed an emotional memory linked to specific sound stimuli during the prenatal period, the doctor explained. If Jennifer sang regularly during her pregnancy, it's plausible the twins associate certain melodies with safety and comfort. "But why specifically Emma's voice?" Richard questioned. "Children have a natural ability to reproduce tones and inflections with more purity than adults. It's possible Emma recreated the vocal characteristics the babies recognize as familiar more accurately." The scientific explanation brought relief to everyone, especially Sarah, who had begun to wonder if there was something supernatural about the situation. "So it's safe to continue with this arrangement?" Richard asked. "As long as it's done responsibly and the child isn't overburdened, I see no medical issues," Dr. Thompson replied. "In fact, it may be beneficial for the twins' emotional development to have consistent, positive stimuli." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. With medical approval, the agreement was set. Emma would start coming to the mansion every day after school to help with the baby's feedings. Richard committed to paying an additional amount that would allow Sarah to enroll her daughter in a better private school. For the first few days, everything worked perfectly. Emma arrived around 4 in the afternoon and spent 2 hours singing to William and James during their afternoon and early evening bottles. The babies not only accepted the food, but seemed to thrive under the musical attention. However, not everyone in the house was happy with the new arrangement. Mrs. Wilson, though relieved by the baby's recovery, felt uneasy about the shift in the household dynamic. She had cared for Jennifer since childhood and now found herself partially replaced by an 8-year-old girl. "Richard, I need to talk to you," she said one morning as he had coffee on the porch. "Of course, Mrs. Wilson. What's on your mind?" "It's about this situation with Sarah's girl. Don't you think it's becoming too irregular?" Richard stopped chewing, noticing the discomfort in the housekeeper's voice. "Irregular how?" "A child taking on responsibilities that should belong to qualified professionals. What if something goes wrong? What if she gets tired and no longer wants to help? The babies might start refusing food again. Mrs. Wilson, I understand your concerns, but the facts speak for themselves. My children are healthy and thriving for the first time since they were born. But what about the future? This dependence could become problematic as they grow. Besides, it's not proper for a family like ours to rely so much on—" She hesitated. "On what, Mrs. Wilson? On people of humble means?" Richard asked, an edge creeping into his voice. That's not what I meant, Richard. It's just that we're mixing social spheres in a way that could bring complications for everyone involved. Richard Mitchell fell silent for a moment, pondering the housekeeper's words. Part of him understood Mrs. Wilson's concerns about maintaining proper boundaries, but another part resented the implication that Emma was inadequate because of her social background. Mrs. Wilson, Jennifer always taught me that a person's worth isn't in their bank account, but in their character and actions. That girl saved my children when specialist doctors couldn't. I won't question a miracle because of social conventions. Mrs. Wilson lowered her head, acknowledging she had touched a nerve. You're right, Richard. I'm sorry. It's just, I feel like I'm losing my usefulness in this house. Richard softened his expression, finally understanding the true source of Mrs. Wilson's worry. Mrs. Wilson, you took care of Jennifer, and now you're helping raise our children. Your importance to this family is irreplaceable. Emma isn't here to replace anyone. She's here to add something only she can provide. The conversation brought new understanding between them, but it also planted a seed of concern in Richard's mind. What if Mrs. Wilson was right about the risks of relying so much on Emma? That worry grew stronger a few days later, when Emma arrived at the mansion visibly upset. What happened, sweetheart? Sarah asked, noticing her daughter's mood. I had an argument with some girls at school. They said I'm acting important because I work for a millionaire, Emma explained, her eyes watery. Sarah sighed. She had feared her daughter's unusual situation might stir jealousy among classmates. What did you say? That I don't work for anyone. I just help babies who need me. But they didn't believe me. Richard, who had overheard from the hallway, felt a weight in his chest. The last thing he wanted was for Emma to suffer socially for helping his family. That day, when it was time to feed the twins, Emma was less cheerful than usual. Her voice, though still melodic, lacked the spontaneous joy that had defined earlier sessions. William and James noticed the difference. Though they still took their bottles, they did so with less enthusiasm, and James even stopped sucking mid-meal, looking worriedly at Emma. Are you all right, dear? Richard asked gently. Yes, sir, it's just... Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. What do you mean? At school, some people think it's strange I spend so much time here, and sometimes I worry if William and James will become too dependent on me. Richard was struck by the maturity of Emma's observation. It was a valid concern he himself had begun to consider. You know, Emma, you're being very wise to think about these things. How about we talk to Dr. Thompson about it? They scheduled a meeting with the pediatrician to discuss long-term strategies. Dr. Thompson suggested a gradual plan to reduce the baby's dependence on Emma's presence while preserving the benefits of what had been established. We can start recording Emma singing the lullabies so they can be played even when she's not here, the doctor suggested. Gradually, the babies will get used to the music without necessarily needing her physical presence. But won't that make them stop needing me? Emma asked, her voice a mix of relief and sadness. Not completely, dear. You'll always be special to them, but it's important they learn to be independent too, the doctor explained. The plan was implemented over the following weeks. Richard bought a high-quality sound system for the baby's room and recorded Emma singing all the songs she knew. At first, the twins still preferred Emma's physical presence, but gradually they began to accept the recordings during some meals. This allowed Emma to resume some normal childhood activities, including participating in extracurriculars at school. However, the reduction in Emma's presence revealed other aspects of the situation that no one had anticipated. Richard began to realize just how accustomed he'd grown to having the girl in the house. Her natural joy and innocent perspective brought a lightness to the home that had been missing since the loss of Jennifer. Sarah, may I ask you a personal question? Richard said one evening as Emma played with the babies in the living room. Of course, sir. Emma's father, is he involved in her life? Sarah tensed but answered honestly. No, sir. He left us when she was 3. Said he wasn't ready to be a father. And does Emma miss him? She asks about him sometimes, but I've learned to be both mother and father to her. It's not easy, but we do the best we can. Richard nodded thoughtfully. He too was navigating the challenges of single parenthood, though under very different circumstances. "She's an exceptional girl, Sarah. You must be very proud." "I am, sir. She's always been special. Even as a little girl, she showed an empathy that surprised adults." At that moment, Emma approached carrying James, who had started to fuss. "I think he's sleepy," she said, gently rocking the baby. Richard watched in awe as James instantly calmed in Emma's arms. There was something almost magical about how she connected with children. "Emma, can I ask you something?" Richard said. "Of course. What do you want to be when you grow up?" The girl paused to think, her eyes sparkling with possibilities. "I want to help children. Maybe be a teacher or a doctor, or maybe work somewhere that takes care of babies who don't have parents." Richard felt his heart tighten. Emma's answer revealed so much about her character and her own life experiences. "Those are beautiful dreams, sweetheart, and I'm sure you'll achieve any one of them." "You really think so?" "I do. You have a special gift for caring for others. That's very rare and precious." That night, Richard couldn't sleep, thinking about their conversation. Emma had entered his life at a moment of despair and brought not just a practical solution, but also a renewed perspective on what it meant to be family. He began to wonder if he couldn't do more to support Emma's future without creating harmful dependence or crossing appropriate boundaries. The next morning, he approached Sarah with a new proposal. "Sarah, I'd like to set up an educational fund for Emma, not as payment for her help, but as an investment in an exceptional child's future." Sarah was silent for a long moment, clearly moved. "Mr. Mitchell, that's incredibly generous, but—" "No buts, Sarah. This isn't charity. It's recognition. Your daughter brought life back to my children when no one else could. The least I can do is ensure she has the best educational opportunities possible. What if she doesn't want to accept it when she's older? Then the money will be available for whatever use she deems appropriate. The choice will always be hers." Sarah began to cry quietly, the weight of years of financial struggles and worries about her daughter's future washing over her. "Thank you, sir. I don't know how to thank you." "No need to thank me, Sarah. We're the ones who owe you gratitude." When Emma learned about the educational fund, her reaction was typical of her selfless personality. "Can I use some of the money to help other children too?" Richard smiled, unsurprised by the question. "When you're older, you can use the money however you think best, sweetheart. Then I'll study hard to be the best person I can be and help lots of children like William and James." The determination in Emma's voice deeply moved Richard. He realized he hadn't just found a solution to his son's immediate problem. Perhaps he'd found an extension of his own family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us so much as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. As the months passed, life at the mansion settled into a new normal. William and James grew healthy and strong, though they maintained a special bond with Emma. She continued visiting 3 times a week, balancing her school responsibilities with the time she devoted to the babies. Mrs. Wilson, after heartfelt conversations with Richard, found her role in the house expanding. She became a sort of mentor to Emma, teaching her about traditional childcare and sharing stories about Jennifer as a child. "You know, Emma," Mrs. Wilson said one afternoon as they prepared bottles together, "you remind me so much of Jennifer at your age." "How so, Mrs. Wilson?" "She also had that huge heart and always wanted to take care of everyone around her. When she was little, she once brought home 3 stray cats she found on the street." Emma smiled, imagining Richard's late wife as a compassionate child. "Mr. Richard told me she used to sing to the babies when they were still in her belly." "Oh yes, she would spend hours talking to them, singing, even reading stories aloud. She said she wanted them to know her voice before they were born. That's why they love music so much." "Exactly. And you, my dear, have become the bridge between their mother's memory and the present. It's a beautiful responsibility, but an important one." These conversations helped Emma better understand her role in the twins' lives and feel more connected to the family's story. However, not everything went smoothly. When William and James turned 8 months old, They began showing clearer preferences and distinct personalities. William was calmer and more observant, while James was active and curious. James developed a habit of crying intensely whenever Emma prepared to leave, reaching out his little arms toward her and refusing to be comforted by anyone else. "This is becoming a problem," Richard remarked to Sarah one particularly difficult afternoon. James had cried for over an hour after Emma left, rejecting all attempts by Richard and Mrs. Wilson to console him. "Maybe he's going through a phase of separation anxiety," Sarah suggested. "It's normal for babies this age. But he only reacts this way when Emma leaves. With me and Mrs. Wilson, he's fine." The situation grew more complicated when James started refusing food on days Emma didn't visit. It was as if he'd regressed to his earliest days, rejecting any nourishment. Richard called another meeting with Dr. Thompson to discuss the situation. "It's possible James has developed an excessive attachment to Emma," the doctor diagnosed after hearing the full account. "While understandable, it could become problematic if not managed properly." "What can we do?" Richard asked. "We need to gradually expand James's circle of trust. Emma can help by introducing other people positively during her visits." "Like how?" "She can sing the songs while you or Mrs. Wilson feed James. Gradually he'll learn to associate safety, not just with Emma's presence, but also with other important people in his life." The plan was implemented with patience and consistency. Emma began including Richard and Mrs. Wilson in her singing sessions, encouraging James to accept care from others while she was present. "Let's sing together, Uncle Richard," Emma suggested, using the affectionate term she'd naturally adopted. Richard, who'd never considered himself musical, discovered he had a decent voice when singing along with Emma. More importantly, James slowly began to accept that others could also provide safety and comfort. William, on the other hand, showed growing independence, though he still held a special fondness for Emma. He'd learned to accept care from different people more easily, displaying a naturally adaptable personality. "William will be easier to raise," Richard joked one afternoon, watching the baby happily interact with Mrs. Wilson. "Every child has their own personality," Emma observed with wisdom beyond her years. "James just needs a little more reassurance, but once he trusts, he'll be the most affectionate baby in the world." Emma's prediction proved correct. As James grew more comfortable with other caregivers, his naturally loving personality emerged. He became a baby who gave smiles generously and radiated contagious joy. One day, when the twins turned 10 months old, something special happened. Richard was feeding James while Emma sang to William when James clearly babbled, "Ma, ma." Everyone in the room fell silent. James had said his first word, but he'd used the term children usually reserve for their mothers. Richard felt a mix of joy and melancholy. It was wonderful that James was developing normally, but painful that Jennifer wasn't there to witness it. "He's calling for his mommy," Emma whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Yes," Richard agreed, his voice thick. "He knows he has a mommy even if she isn't here." Mrs. Wilson was deeply moved, remembering when Jennifer had spoken her first words decades ago. In the following days, James repeated the word often, always looking around as if searching for someone. William soon began imitating his brother, and before long both were regularly babbling, "Mama." "Should I correct them?" Richard asked Dr. Thompson during a routine checkup. "Not necessarily. It's natural for them to have an instinctive understanding of a mother figure, even without her physical presence. Over time, they'll learn to call you Dada and develop a fuller understanding of family structure." "What if they ask about their mother when they're older? It'll be important to be honest in an age-appropriate way. They have a right to know Jennifer's story and understand they were loved by her even before birth." Richard decided to start preparing materials for when the boys were older: photos, videos, recordings of Jennifer's voice, even the pregnancy ultrasounds. He wanted William and James to grow up knowing their mother, even if only through preserved memories. Emma offered to help organize the materials. "Can I write letters from them to Mommy?" she suggested, telling her about the things they do every day for when they're older and can read. The idea touched Richard deeply. Emma had proposed a way to keep Jennifer present in her sons' lives in a healthy, loving manner. I think that's a beautiful idea, Emma. Can you do that? I can. I'll write about the first smiles, the first words, and all the special things they do. That's how Emma became not just the person who helped the twins eat, but also the chronicler of their childhood. She kept a simple journal, recording important milestones and everyday moments that Richard, in his work rush, sometimes missed. One day, while Emma was writing in her notebook, Richard asked, "What are you noting down today?" That William managed to sit up by himself for the first time, and that James laughed so hard when Mrs. Wilson made a funny face that he started hiccuping, Emma replied, focused on her writing. Richard realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Emma wasn't just caring for his children, she was documenting their childhood with a tenderness and attention to detail he couldn't always maintain himself. "Emma, you know you're doing something very important, don't you?" "I am." "Yes, you're creating a story of the boys' childhood that they can read when they grow up. It's a gift that will last forever." Emma smiled shyly, happy to know her work was valued. As the months passed, the household dynamic evolved into something none of the adults had anticipated at the start. Emma had become an integral part of the family, though everyone was careful to maintain appropriate boundaries. Sarah was promoted to household manager, taking on expanded responsibilities in coordinating the home. Richard insisted she take management and administration courses, paid for by him, so she could grow professionally. "I don't want you to feel trapped in this job," Richard explained. "I want you to have options and be able to choose your future based on what you truly want." "Mr. Mitchell, working here has never been a prison. You've all become like family to us," Sarah replied honestly. "And your family to us too, Sarah. That's exactly why I want to make sure you have the best opportunities possible." Emma's education was also enriched. Richard hired tutors to supplement her formal schooling, focusing on music, languages, and leadership development. Emma showed a natural aptitude for languages and had expressed interest in learning Italian to better understand the lullabies she sang. "Why is it important to learn Italian?" Richard asked during one of their conversations. "Because when I sing to William and James, I want to fully understand what I'm saying. Words have power, and I want that power to be used in the best way." The maturity of Emma's answer continued to surprise Richard. At just 8 years old, she showed an intuitive understanding of the importance of intention and meaning behind actions. When the twins turned 1, Richard decided to organize a special birthday party. It was the first major celebration since losing Jennifer, and he wanted it to be a milestone in his family's new chapter. "I want it to be a party where all the important people are present," he told Sarah and Emma as they planned the event. "All the important people?" Emma repeated. "You, your mother, Mrs. Wilson, Dr. Thompson, and some close friends who knew Jennifer. I want William and James to grow up knowing they're surrounded by love, even if it's in different ways than the traditional." The party was held in the mansion's garden with soft decorations and gentle background music. Richard had hired a photographer to document the occasion, wanting to preserve memories for his children to see when they grew older. During the celebration, Emma sang traditional lullabies for the guests, explaining how each one had been passed down through generations of her family. William and James, now walking with assistance, happily interacted with everyone there. "It's beautiful to see how you've created a new family tradition," remarked Dr. Thompson to Richard as they watched Emma play with the twins. "It wasn't planned, but sometimes the best things in life happen when we least expect them," Richard replied. "And how are you feeling about the future?" Richard paused to reflect before answering. "For the first time since Jennifer passed, I feel genuine hope. Not just survival, but hope. My children are growing up surrounded by love and care, and I've learned that family can take forms I never imagined." Have Emma and Sarah truly become part of the family? Not officially, of course, but emotionally, yes. They've filled voids I didn't even know existed. Emma brought childlike joy back into the house, and Sarah has shown a loyalty and dedication we rarely find in any relationship. The party went perfectly, creating memories Richard knew he would cherish forever. When the guests had left and the children were asleep, he sat in the garden with Sarah and Emma for one last conversation. "I want to thank you both for everything you've done for us this year," Richard began. "We have much to be grateful for too, sir," Sarah replied. "Emma, you saved my children when no one else could. But more than that, you've taught us about generosity, unconditional love, and the importance of preserving family traditions." "I just followed my heart," Emma said simply, "and that's exactly what made all the difference." Richard paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts for what he wanted to say next. "I've been thinking about the future, and I'd like to make a formal proposal to you both." Sarah and Emma listened intently, intrigued. "I'd like you to move into the mansion permanently. There's a suite on the second floor that can be adapted into a private apartment. Sarah would continue as household manager, but with complete flexibility to pursue other professional interests if she wishes. And Emma would officially become William and James's older sister." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Sarah fought back tears, while Emma processed the full meaning of the offer. "Does that mean I could take care of them every day?" Emma asked. "It means you'd be part of the family in a way that honors both your importance and your unique identity," Richard explained. "And could I still be myself?" Sarah asked hesitantly. "Sarah, the idea isn't to change who you are, but to officially recognize who you've already become to us. You've brought life back to this house." Emma looked at her mother, her eyes shining with possibility. "Mom, can we, please?" Sarah was clearly moved, but also concerned about the long-term implications. "Mr. Mitchell, this is incredibly generous, but what if circumstances change? What if you remarry? What if you decide you no longer need us?" Richard understood Sarah's worries deeply. She had been abandoned before and naturally feared overdependence. "Sarah, I understand your concerns and they're valid. That's why I'd like to formalize this arrangement legally. You'd have guaranteed housing security, regardless of changes in my personal life. And Emma, I'd like to officially adopt her as my daughter if you agree." The revelation left mother and daughter completely stunned. Sarah began to cry openly, while Emma sat in silence, trying to grasp what Richard had just proposed. "Adoption," Sarah whispered. "Yes. Emma would legally become my daughter, sister to William and James. You'd still be her mother, of course, but she'd have all the rights and protections of an adopted child, including inheritance and lifelong financial security." But why?" asked Emma, confused. Richard knelt down to meet the girl at eye level. "Because you saved my children, Emma. Because you brought love and joy back into our home. Because you've shown a capacity to care and love that's rare at any age. And because Jennifer would have adored you. I'm certain she would approve of having you as our daughter." Emma began to cry, but they were tears of joy mixed with emotional overwhelm. "Does this mean William and James would really be my brothers?" "Yes, sweetheart, really, forever. And could I help you raise them?" "You already are. The adoption would just make official what already exists in our hearts." Sarah was wrestling with conflicting emotions. The joy of seeing her daughter so valued competed with deep fears about drastic changes in their lives. "Mr. Mitchell, I need time to think. This is a very important decision." "Of course, Sarah. There's no rush. But I want you to know my intention is to protect and honor both of you, not create dependence or discomfort. What if Emma changes her mind when she grows up? What if she no longer wants this responsibility? Then she'll be free to choose her own path, as any daughter should be. The adoption wouldn't create obligations, only opportunities and security." In the days that followed, Sarah and Emma talked at length about the proposal. Emma was excited by the idea, but Sarah had practical and emotional concerns she needed to work through. "Mum, what are you afraid of?" Emma asked one night as they prepared for bed. "I'm afraid this might change who you are, sweetheart. I'm afraid you'll forget where you came from or stop seeing me as your real mother." "Mom, you'll always be my mother. Nothing can change that. But having Uncle Richard as a father would be special too. It would be like having an even bigger family." The simplicity of Emma's logic touched Sarah deeply. Her daughter had understood something that she, as an adult, was complicating with her own fears. "And you really want to care for William and James forever?" "Not forever, Mom. But as long as they need me and as long as I can help, they're special, and I feel happy when I'm with them. Even if it means extra responsibilities? Even then. You always taught me that caring for others is important. Now I have the chance to do it in a special way. Sarah realized her daughter had matured in ways she hadn't fully noticed. Emma was considering the situation with a clarity and generosity that showed exceptional character. A week after the initial proposal, Sarah approached Richard with an answer. "Mr. Mitchell, after much thought and talking with Emma, we'd like to accept your offer." Richard felt a wave of relief and joy. "Are you sure, Sarah?" "I am. You've been our family in all but name for months. Making it official just acknowledges a reality that already exists. What about your concerns about changes?" I realized the change has already happened. We've already been transformed by this experience. The adoption will just give Emma the security and opportunities she deserves. And you're comfortable with all the legal implications. As long as it's clear I remain her mother, yes, we want Emma to have two parents who love her, not for me to be replaced. Never, Sarah. The idea is to expand Emma's family, not diminish it. The legal procedures for adoption were initiated immediately. Richard hired the best family law attorneys to ensure every aspect was handled properly. During the process, he had long conversations with Emma about what it would mean to be his adopted daughter. "Emma, I want you to understand that being adopted means you'll have the same responsibilities and privileges as William and James," explained Richard. "What kind of responsibilities?" "Studying hard, being respectful, helping our family grow in a healthy way. It also means you'll inherit part of our business and properties when I'm no longer here." "Inherit?" "Yes. You'll become one of the owners of everything our family has. It's a big responsibility." Emma fell silent for a moment, processing the information. "Does that mean I could use that money to help other children like we talked about before?" "Yes, dear. When you're older, you can decide how to use the family's resources. Then I want to learn everything about managing money and businesses so I can make the best choices." Richard smiled, once again impressed by Emma's maturity. "We'll make sure you get the best possible education in all those areas." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave a sincere comment below. Do you think Richard made the right decision by adopting Emma? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us.